You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined, as always, by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys, and this show is presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. First of all, I want to thank you guys for joining us this evening for a Bills Mafia therapy session. We know you have your choices on a Monday night, so thank you for choosing us here at the Air Raid Hour. But if you haven't ever checked us out, Monday nights after a loss is generally a therapy session. We let it all out. We try to talk through it. We try to figure out where it is we go from here after the Buffalo Bills Week 3 loss to division rival Miami Dolphins down in Miami Gardens, 21-19. Dave, I want to start off with just, first of all, a kudos to the Miami Dolphins. Over the last 38 games, Miami has the fourth most wins in the AFC behind Kansas City, Buffalo, and Tennessee. They still have a lot to prove because they always seem to crumble at the end of the season and miss the postseason. But over the last 38 games, they have been one of the best teams in the AFC. So I'm going to give them credit for that. And I'm going to give them credit for beating the Buffalo Bills on Sunday, even though it really did feel like the Buffalo Bills more so beat themselves. And I wanted to give the kudos to the Dolphins fans first, because this is what I'm about to say now. I'm less concerned about the Miami Dolphins right now on Monday night than I was before that game that the Buffalo Bills just lost to the Miami Dolphins. The Buffalo Bills moved the ball up and down the field at will against the Miami Dolphins. They just couldn't finish any drives. The defense didn't allow Miami's offense to do really much of anything outside of that 3rd and 22 conversion to Jalen Waddle. Our offense is going to clean it up. We're not always going to not finish drives like that. And our defense is going to get healthy, not to mention the conditions that the Bills and the Dolphins had to play in yesterday. I'm more confident in this Buffalo Bills team, even after a loss, than I was. What are your initial feelings after this game?
My initial feelings were, after everything we've seen after the game, stats, whatever, that this really does feel like an anomaly. And like, it feels like there was just so much of a perfect storm that kind of went against the Bills in this game. Some of that the Bills' own doing, by the way, a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not here to try to like take accountability off of the Bills' backs and put it on anyone else. But between the heat, the injuries, the miscues, the missed opportunities, and it wasn't even just necessarily miscues like drop passes, but like dropped interceptions from Matt Milano, and things like that. Obviously, the 3rd and 22. We had just gotten done talking about in the Titans game how early in the game the Bills gave up a couple 3rd and longs, which was kind of like annoying, but obviously got past it. And it just seemed to all boil up to, the Bills had chances and they just didn't ultimately end up capitalizing for a number of factors, right? Whether it was the injuries, just not executing, tired from the heat, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, the Bills lost this game, and there are a lot of factors and there's a lot of nuanced discussion that has to take place because of it. But I am still I am very confident in the team, and I'm very confident that the Bills are still a better football team than the Miami Dolphins, even though they didn't win the game yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where my confidence kind of waivers, if you will, if you want to use that term of phrase, is now with the injuries, like looking ahead,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it was an infirmary out there yesterday between the cramping, other injuries, and the Bills already came into the game with injuries. So my longer term view now is like, we need to get this team healthy. We need to get guys back. I'm still very confident that even, a lesser than optimal sort of Bills team as far as like having every single starter out there is still one of the better teams in this league. But I do have some concerns, and it would be hard not to, right? With all the injuries we had, to like sit here and say like you're not a little concerned about like what it means going forward from an injury standpoint. But as far as Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills, it doesn't really change my thought. In fact, to your point, maybe even makes me feel a little bit even more confident that if the Bills were in the right situation and executed better, different circumstances, they are still very much the better team. So we'll take that away as we kind of, get into this game a bit.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, this game reminded me of the New England Wind game from 2021 in just so many ways. I'm not blaming the elements for the Buffalo Bills losing. I mean, I was generally concerned for the player safety out there at some points yesterday. It was 120 degrees on the field. It was absolutely outrageous. But take the temperature out of the equation, and we blow that Miami Dolphins team out of the water yesterday. I truly do believe that. I mean, the Bills had the ball for 40 minutes and 40 seconds. They outgained the Miami Dolphins 497 to 212. If the weather didn't lead to what I thought was a ton of miscues out there, led to a ton of the guys leaving the field, etc., the Buffalo Bills win that football game. So to me, this L is more of a fluke than anything. At the end of the day, it's still a loss, and it goes on the score sheet as a loss. But this really does remind me so much of that New England wind game last year. And Dolphins fans are feeling pretty full of themselves, like Patriots fans were. I remember that NBC Sports Boston guys like Tom Curran and Michael Holley were feeling themselves after that win. And then the Buffalo Bills came back a couple of weeks later, stomped them, and then won the AFC East and went to the postseason and stomped them again. So I feel like all things equal, I feel like we are going to end up with that similar situation this year. It's going to be the Dolphins on the receiving end of that second L and possibly the third L when they get their wild card berth. But what do you think? I don't think Miami has anything to crown themselves over yet, like a lot of people in the national media and their fans say that there is.
Yeah, for me personally, and we know the Bills have been through good starts to seasons before in the past during the drought era, especially culminating with that 2011, win over the Patriots, that game that you were at, famously at, and talked about that being one of the best experiences you've ever had. The Bills were 3-0 that year, I believe 5-2 or something like that, and just utterly collapsed. And I'm not saying that Miami is going to do that. They are the only undefeated team in the AFC right now. But it's not like we're in week 10. We're not in week 11, week 12. Like, this is week 3. The Chiefs are 2-1. Bills are 2-1. Like, the Chargers have only won one game. The Raiders are 0-3. The Broncos are 2-1. And I don't think anybody's thinking that the Broncos are some elite team. It's weird things, weird things have to play themselves out. I shouldn't say weird things have to play themselves out. Weird scenarios right now, early in the season, will work themselves out as we go throughout the rest of the season. Miami still has a very tough schedule ahead. I mean, obviously the Bills do as well, but there's nothing to crown right now other than the fact that you can say, look, you are first place in the division right now. You do have that tiebreaker at the moment against the Bills. So, like, you are in a good position if you're the Miami Dolphins. There's no denying that. Like, yes, through three games, you're in the best possible position you could be in if you're the Miami Dolphins. So be happy that you won this game, because, look, we went through many struggling years against the Pats, could never beat them, and I kind of get it. It's not been necessarily that long for the Dolphins against the Bills, but in recent memory, and really in the last, even going back to when Fitz was here, and even before Josh Allen, the Bills had a pretty good track record against the Dolphins in the last decade. And so I kind of understand it. If the Dolphins fans want to puff their chest a little bit here, that's fine. I'm not going to get too worked up about it. I'm going to ignore it. Pete says, if I'm a Fins fan, I'm happy we stole the game, hoping that game being one of our worst performances. Yep. And if you're the Dolphins right now, you're happy you won that game, because if you're the Dolphins, I think your goal at the beginning of the season was probably to make the playoffs, right? If you win the division, that no one, I mean, I don't think anyone can realistically say that that's what the expectation was. So take it for what it's worth now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Dolphins fan, you sure as heck hope that's one of your worst performances of the season because let's face it, like I'm not gonna lie to you, other than blitzing a ton on defense and it helping you once you got down into the red zone, even though they got gashed for like 500 yards of offense. So their defense gave up 500 yards. They just happened to stop the Buffalo Bills down, near the scoring area, getting a timely turnover inside the 10-yard line. And their offense really didn't do much of anything outside of that bomb to Jalen Waddle. You're the Miami Dolphins fan. You're like, yeah, you have to realistically look at this and say the Buffalo Bills lost this game more than we won this game. So let's take a quick look at sort of the things that contributed to this loss, contributing factors. We're not blaming the loss on all of these things. We're not using it as an excuse, but let's look at all of the various different things. And I have a running list here, and I want you to tell me if I missed anything. Here's my running list of things that contributed to the Buffalo Bills losing this football game. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Trey White, Dane Jackson all missed this game for obvious reasons. Some of them are done for the season. Christian Benford left this game quite early. We were down to all backups in the secondary. No Jordan Phillips or Ed Oliver, our two starting defensive tackles. Our wide receiver core was limited by the heat. Gabriel Davis looked like he was still coming back from that sprained ankle, and that Jake Kumaro injury kept him off of being able to be on a snap count. Mitch Morse didn't play. Spencer Brown, Ryan Bates, Greg Van Roten all went down. We were literally down to our last 5 linemen. I'm pretty sure that Tommy Doyle played that last series on a torn ACL because he's now out for the season, and they never pulled him out of that game. And he now is out for the season today. So unless he got hurt on the very last play, Tommy Doyle was probably playing that last series with the torn ACL. It was just a horrid offensive series early in the game. Zach Moss run stuffed. Zach Moss run stuffed. The Dolphins could then pin their ears back. They forced that Josh Allen fumble, scored from inside the 10-yard line. We bobbled the snap at the half that cost us a field goal. Davis dropped a touchdown, even though it was a good defensive play to sort of knock it out of his hands. Bass missed a field goal. Milano dropped a pick 6. Allen missed McKenzie in the end zone after he, hurt his finger on a play and he sort of skipped the next ball to Isaiah McKenzie. And Isaiah McKenzie caught the ball, couldn't get out of bounds when we could have probably kicked a field goal towards the end of the game. And we also had a holding on that last drive as well. I mean, did I miss anything? Just the perfect storm of injuries and mistakes and just awfulness.
A lot of things. I mean, Josh Allen's unsportsmanlike conduct, which obviously was a retaliation. You had the 2nd and goal. You mentioned you had the 2nd and goal at the 1-yard line, and came away with no points on that drive. Gabe Davis had another, catch that probably should have been. I know the defender made a good play on that too, but that was one coming up the middle of the field, like near the end of the game, that would have put the Bills in like better field position. I mean, look, the list goes on and on, right? It was a litany of miscues and mistakes, and yet at the end of the game, the Bills still had a chance to potentially win it. So, yeah, I mean, you've covered pretty much mostly all of it. Yeah. I think that, I mean, it goes without saying. I think that series, right, where Zach Moss ran it up the gut twice and then Josh Allen fumbled, was probably Ken Dorsey's worst series of his tenure so far, I would say, as an offensive coordinator, short tenure. So, yeah, I mean, all of that, officiating one-sided, but we're used to that. And that's an interesting point, right, because Josh Allen dropped back 70 whatever times, and there was not a single defensive, defensive penalty at all on the Miami Dolphins the entire game.
And all I care about is consistency. And a lot of Dolphins fans were clapping back and saying the penalties were only 7-4. But at the same time, there were some crucial penalties on the Buffalo Bills. Christian Wilkins just gets away with grabbing Josh Allen's junk. Josh Allen's the only one penalized. Melvin Ingram kicked Josh Allen. Like, there was a concerted effort from the Miami Dolphins defensive line in that game. And Josh Allen let the officials know it, to go after his penis. Like, that was literally their goal, was to knock him in the junk to try to slow Josh Allen down. They can't shut Josh Allen down on the football field, so they literally resorted to trying to kick him in the nuts. That is what it came down to for the Miami Dolphins defense. That was their game plan. Their game plan was literally to just cock knock Josh Allen. That was their game plan. And the referees allowed them to get away with it. In the first quarter, Christian Benford got the most ticky-tack holding call I've ever seen in my life. And then on the final drive of the game, the Miami defender did 10 times that to Gabriel Davis, and there was nothing called. Again, I'm not mad if you allow teams to play physically, but it needs to be fair on both sides. Christian Wilkins comes running in and smashing Josh Allen after a play. Christian Wilson gets that helmet-to-helmet call, doesn't get that helmet-to-helmet call on Dawson Knox, but Jaquan Johnson does. You got to call it fair. You got to call it both ways. The Miami Dolphins got away with so much more in this game than the Buffalo Bills did. And if you're not willing to admit that, you are a biased Miami Dolphins fan or you didn't watch the game. It's that clear. It's that simple. Like the refereeing in this game was fucking ridiculous. Not to mention, and again, it's ticky-tack stuff, but on the last play of the game, Isaiah McKenzie should have gotten out of bounds. He didn't. The Miami Dolphins player practically tried to tackle him, knock the ball out of Isaiah McKenzie's hands. That's delay of game. That also reminded me that Mike McDaniel threw a challenge flag when he can't challenge the play. That should have been a delay of game. Then the official, instead of running the ball back to the huddle so the Buffalo Bills could snap it down it and kick a field goal, decided to walk it back. Come on. It was absolutely ridiculous, that officiating in this game. I don't want to use it as an excuse again, but it was 100% a contributing factor to why the Buffalo Bills lost this football game.
It was a contributing factor for sure. And I think that's the thing that you made the point, and it's about consistency on both sides. If you're going to call the game a certain way, just make it the same for both teams. Like if you're going to call the ticky-tack hold on Benford, you've got to call those types of plays on the Dolphins. I'm fine if you don't want to call that, by the way, and then you don't call it on the Dolphins. Like, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with it. Like, just, and I think a lot of people have this, have this mindset. Like, they're not necessarily so concerned about, like, necessarily from one game to the next, if like a hold from one game to the next is called the same, as long as within that same game, it's called sort of equivalently for both teams. I think that's the best we can ask for right now. One game they might call that, one game they might not, but within the same game, I think that's the thing that people are really, really bent out of shape about. So the consistency, and that's nothing new. That's what we're asking for, right? I mean, I know it's hard. I know it is, but it's like some of these things like are quite obvious. So By Chance comes in with a super chat. Thank you, By Chance. Appreciate that. Nice to hear from you again. Seeing you back in the comment section is always nice. Everyone is so confident in Cromer, but overlook the lack of talent he has to work with. Saffold is not who people think he is. I have no faith in Brown. Only a matter of time until J.A. is the one hurt.
That's interesting because we had this conversation today in our Cover One group chat, and you hardly ever get involved in the group chat, and you were getting involved in the conversation in the group chat, and we both sort of agree with By Chance a little bit here to a degree. I like Spencer Brown's upside. Obviously, he's young. He's still got a lot of work to do. I like the Roger Saffold addition, but Brandon Beane said at the beginning of the offseason, our number one goal is to protect Josh Allen, and then they did very little to protect Josh Allen. It was Saffold. It was David Quessenberry. It was Greg Van Roten. We didn't really use a draft pick on an offensive lineman until the 6th round, when we spent hours and hours and hours and hours researching and talking about offensive line prospects for our draft shows. That was just completely wasted time. I do agree. Like, my philosophy, if I was an NFL general manager, would be to build my offensive and defensive line first, go get myself a quarterback, and then just churn my skill position guys. That's what my philosophy would be. I'd be drafting and paying the big uglies up front in the quarterback. That's all I would do. And I would burn and churn the rest. Obviously, I'm not in charge of an NFL team for very good reasons. I'd probably run it into the ground. But to that extent, I agree with By Chance. I do not think the Buffalo Bills have invested enough in this offensive line. What do you think?
The way they've invested is probably not to what I would do. I mean, they have invested in traits in the middle rounds with guys like Tommy Doyle and Spencer Brown, and then they've tried to go after bargain free agent signings, right? And hoping that they turn out to be, value signings. I don't think anybody's expecting David Quessenberry to come in and be like this all world right tackle, but they're they're expecting, they're what Bean's doing and signing him is expecting him to produce over the dollars that he spent, right? So it's like they're trying to get value out of these guys. The only guys they really invested a ton in are Mitch Morse and Deion Dawkins, and those weren't even guys that Brandon Bean drafted. So you do have to start to think about, like, at some point, is Brandon Bean going to spend a premium draft pick on an offensive lineman? And to this point, they haven't. And maybe part of that is like they had Aaron Cromer and they thought that he could work with some of these guys. And look, the guys have been banged up. I get it. Spencer Brown missed some time in practice and training camp. So, like, it remains to be seen. And this was not anything new. We talked about this going into training camp. We talked about this going into the season. A lot of you guys in the comment section as well had said, like, what's our biggest concern still going into the season? It was the offensive line. And we were hoping maybe Aaron Cromer could band-aid that somewhat. But look, Josh was getting killed yesterday. Like, the Miami defensive line was all over him. He barely had time to throw on a lot of plays. He was taking some hits that he normally doesn't take. And he was taking some dirty hits too. So you worry, you want him to be healthy. You want him to get out of these things unscathed. And he got beat up himself a little bit too. He was never going to come out of that game, but Josh himself even got beat up for the first time really that we've ever seen.
Pops Mafia comes in and says, who's going to replace Bates if he can't play due to concussion? We're going to get to the injury report later, but I mean, it's not looking pretty. We don't know the status of Greg Van Roten. There was no update on him. Obviously, Ike Bucker's still on the PUP list. Tommy Doyle's now out for the season. So it could be Greg Manx from the practice squad getting called up to the active roster. It could be Bobby Hart. There's a number of different factors, and we'll break that down later in the show, but you're looking at Greg Manx or Bobby Hart at this point. Maybe Quessenberry, but they also might want to keep Quessenberry on the bench to be that swing tackle and a guy in case Spencer Brown, maybe he doesn't come back. Who knows? So a lot of question marks. The injury report is going to be something to keep an eye on this week. Pete Nana says so many day 2 rookies start on this offensive line league wide. And someone else, I believe it was Alan Collins, said it feels like offensive line play has been weirdly lacking recently in the NFL as well. And I don't disagree with any of those points. I think that if you look at it, there are very few dominant offensive lines in the National Football League. Cleveland comes to mind. Detroit comes to mind. Nothing else comes to mind off the top of my head. I knew New Orleans had a good one until they lost Teron Armstead. Kansas City's got a good one, but they can really only pass block. Even they have trouble in the running game.
Chargers do now. Green Bay does.
Slater's out for the year.
Yeah, Green Bay's got a pretty good offensive line.
And they were still starting to storm Norton at right tackle. Like, it still wasn't even that pretty. Packers are pretty deep on their offensive line. But yeah, very, very few. And it's just it's weird. And I don't even mind their pass blocking so much because of who Josh Allen is. It's the run blocking, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. That's the biggest concern for me. By Chance comes in and says, with another super chat, I always appreciate you, By Chance. He says, I hated the Bernard pick at the time and even more now. Slow and unimpressive on tape, nowhere near third round talent, needed to be an offensive lineman. I mean, Terrell Bernard hasn't really seen the field yet, so I want to reserve, judgment. I liked his college tape. I didn't think he was a third rounder. I thought he was a fourth or a fifth rounder. But that being said, he comes from that Dave Aranda program. He's wired the way the Buffalo Bills want their draft picks to be wired. So I'm not going to sit here and besmirch Terrell Bernard, but I will say that, yeah, I do wish we had another third round pick offensive lineman that we could throw into the mix right now, especially with the injury to Mitch Morse. Would have been nice to have, like, I know he was taken in the second round, but like a Cam Jurgens type or a Luke Fortner type, having one of those types of guys here who's sort of waiting under the wings of Mitch Morse to start that football game, as opposed to Greg Van Roten, who's a guard who snapped very poorly in that entire football game. Or a guard so you could move Ryan Bates over. All of those things would have been nice, but that's all in retrospect. So, the starting five was locked in. I think it's a solid starting five, but injuries do happen. Let's move on now to Josh Allen. And I want to have a conversation about Josh Allen, the game he had. I thought it was a really gritty performance from Josh Allen, even in the loss, even with some of the mistakes. That was one of the more impressive games I've ever honestly personally seen from Josh Allen. And I know that sounds weird, but he was the only reason that we had a shot in this football game. It wasn't his best game. He'll tell you that, but I don't think that there is another quarterback in the league who could have withstanded what Josh Allen withstanded and had his football team in the game. 3 offensive linemen dropped mid-game on top of one not even starting, that person being his center. The receivers dropping like flies, cramping up like crazy. The defense being essentially all backups. The fact the Buffalo Bills could not get anything going on the ground to take any pressure off of him. The sheer number of blitzes that Miami threw at him over the course of this game and the heat, all of that combined into what I thought was an exceptionally gritty performance from Josh Allen. And I was just completely in awe the entire game of what he was able to do. 42 of 63 for 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had no attempts over 25 yards, only 4 attempts over 20 yards. So the Dolphins were really able to keep him at and around the line of scrimmage. 8 carries for 47 yards. I just don't know how he was as solid as he was with all of that pressure. 17 of 22 for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns versus the blitz, and a depleted offensive line and a gassed group of weapons. What were your thoughts on Josh Allen's day?
I mean, he is the only reason the Bills were in that game. He was the best player on the field of both teams. On a day where guys were dropping like flies, you never once looked at Josh Allen and thought that at least he wasn't showing it, that he was letting any of that affect him, letting the weather affect him or anything. You never would know by looking at him. I know he had some throws that like clearly looked like he was fatigued, but he was never going to, at least, outwardly probably display that to anybody. And if it wasn't for him, the Bills wouldn't have been in that game and wouldn't have had the chance really to win it on a couple different occasions. Did he have some throws he would have liked back? Sure, of course. But out of all the things and all the miscues that you can talk about the Bills had in this game, like Josh Allen essentially, tried to erase all of them on his own with his own performance. And he almost did. I mean, a gritty performance is exactly how I put it in the description of the show when I was writing that up. And that's the word that came to mind for me as well. And I think at the end of the day, like, this one hurts him a lot because I think he knows how draining it was on the team. It was draining on himself. And I think he really wanted to get this one. But this is, again, one of those moments I think we look back and we say, like, Josh Allen always finds a way to kind of make these little improvements in his game or take his game to the next level when we think maybe there's not any way he could possibly do that anymore. And I think he's going to look back on this game and there's going to be some things that he himself is going to take away, whether it's a chip on his shoulder, some things that he learned about himself. Absolute gritty performance. And, man, just like an absolute gamer, and wouldn't want anyone else leading my team in that situation. So my hat's off to him.
Yeah, I mean, I gave the Dolphins props at the beginning of the show. Like I said, 4th most wins in the AFC over the last 38 games, but props to their defense as well. It wasn't a perfect performance. They gave up 500 yards of offense, and you could argue if the Bills executed better, they would have given up a ton of more points as well. But, I did mention no attempts by Josh Allen over 25 yards, only 4 attempts over 20. They kept Josh Allen pretty boxed in and inside the first, 20 yards of the football field. And it seemed like when we talk about the positives and the negatives from this game, Ken Dorsey's going to be one of my negatives because it feels like the Bills, responded really well to the blitz early, scored that touchdown to McKenzie, and then they sort of adjusted, no longer let the Bills dump the ball off to the running back, and the Bills sort of got a little bit flustered and didn't have really the best response once Miami adapted to that. Now, again, Josh Allen still put up good statistics, but the proof is in the pudding. We only scored 19 points. So kudos to the Dolphins defense, but someone came in and said, Tom Brady doesn't even win that football game. There's no quarterback on the planet. There's no quarterback in the National Football League that wins with all of those things against him that I just mentioned earlier. Not a single quarterback in the NFL wins that game except Josh Allen. Josh Allen is the only one. He was 2 points short. He's the only quarterback on the planet that I think had the ability to do what he did. And that sort of brings us to our next topic here. For the season, Josh Allen has 1,014 yards, first in the NFL, 9 touchdowns passing, second in the NFL, 2 interceptions, a 71% completion percentage, 19 carries for 113 yards. That's 5.9 a clip and a touchdown. He is responsible for 85% of the Buffalo Bills offense. There's been a lot of criticism after this football game that the Buffalo Bills are too, finger quotes, Josh Allen centric. Tony Dungy made that comment. A couple of other people, Nate Geary has made that comment. A bunch of national people have made that comment today. Is this offense, Dave, do you think in your mind, too Josh Allen centric?
No, because I think, again, this game was an anomaly, and I get where Nate's coming from on that. But I also realize that this game was a very unique circumstance. And did we think that it was too Josh Allen centric against the Rams? Did we think it was too Josh Allen centric against the Titans? No. And I mean, he was still great in both of those games, and he was still kind of the focal point, obviously, of facilitating the offense, as he always is. So, and not to mention, like, again, it, like, he ran when he had to in this game. Obviously, he had the 8 carries, which for him is average, honestly. Like, it maybe even a little below average. So it wasn't like he was running a ton. He did lead the team in rushing, which was funny because we did say that for the game that maybe he might with on fewer carries.
Yeah,
it's not too Josh Allen centric, right? If you're like, it doesn't make sense to me logically, and maybe this is just how my mind works, to say that like the MVP candidate, the best player on your team, that it's too centric on him, right? Like, it almost be like saying like the Packers offense is too centric on Aaron Rodgers. Like, what would they be without Aaron Rodgers, with that receiving group they had? Like, I mean, I understand the argument, and I'm willing to listen to some perspective on that, but I don't think I can sit here and say just because of one game that the Bills are too Josh Allen centric. I can't say that.
By chance comes in and says week 1 and 2, Miami did not really get any pressure on the QB, but were able to get pressure against us. They led the league in pressure rate, or one of the top 5 teams in pressure rate heading into that football game. So I would disagree with that a little bit. Mattis S comes in and says, give Dorsey credit for controlling the time we had the ball. One reason why Hill and Waddle were non-events. But at the same time, our offense got gassed. 90 plays that we ran. But yes, that's exactly the point that you just made. That was the circumstance of the football game. No one's going to sit here and argue the Buffalo Bills can't run the football better. We can run the football more effectively. But at the same time, this offense too Josh Allen centric? This talking point, this narrative is only brought up, as you mentioned, when the Buffalo Bills lose a football game. No one says after the Tennessee Titans game, did we use Josh Allen too much? No one says after the LA Rams game, do you think that Josh Allen threw the ball too many times? Like, do you think he threw it too many? No one says that after we win. They only say it after we lose. And this is just the way the NFL is now. Lamar Jackson is 87% of the Baltimore Ravens offense. And it just seems like every time we try to fix the running game, we overcorrect. I'm thinking back to like the first Jets game in the Meadowlands last year. I'm thinking back to the Saints game on Thanksgiving. This team gets so traditional and they get so rigid. And then the passing game gets clunky when we try to force the run. No one is arguing that we can't be better and more effective running the football, but we need to figure out a way to do it while maintaining the way we pass the football. Because if we come out here next week against Baltimore and try to overcorrect by coming out in 12 personnel and 21 personnel, traditional 21 personnel the entire time, and try to run it like it's 1994, I'm going to rip my freaking hair out, because that's taking away what Josh Allen is best at. That is taking away what makes our offense tick, what makes our offense flow, what makes our offense so potent. So I do think we need to run the ball more effectively, but you better not overcorrect and try to do it in a traditional manner, which is so far essentially what I feel like the Buffalo Bills try to do every time this narrative pops up, and every time we get into a football game or two where Josh Allen maybe throws 10 too many footballs. So I want to make sure that this offense doesn't get too overreactive about what we saw out there against the Miami Dolphins, because it would be a huge mistake But at the same time, short yardage situation, the offensive line, the running game. Let's dive a little deeper into it. Morse was out, multiple bowel snaps by Greg Van Roten before he left to injury, and then Greg Manx came in. Ryan Bates left with concussion. Spencer Brown left with a heat-related illness. Greg Van Roten left with what we don't know yet as an illness. Manx, Doyle, and Quessenberry finished the game on the right side. Doyle eventually tore his ACL on what is assumed to be the last play of the game. Singletary had 9 carries for 13 yards. Moss had 4 carries for 46 yards. 43 of them came on one run. James Cook had 1 carry for 3 yards. The snap counts were as followed: Devin Singletary, 67, Zach Moss, 16, James Cook, 10. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but 3rd and short was a problem. The goal line was a problem. What's the deal here, Dave? Is it the lines? Is it the backs? Is it injuries? Is it a little bit of both? What would you assess as the problem here for the Buffalo Bills in these short yardage situations?
Where have Devin Singletary's best runs been this year? Where have Zach Moss's best runs been this year, at least in the game yesterday? A lot of Devin Singletary's best runs this year have been on some of these tosses, some of these sweeps, getting him outside and then having him cut up the field. Zach Moss bounced that on outside yesterday. The Bills are not stout on the interior in running the ball. It's just a fact. The fact is when you have 2nd and goal at the 1 yard line and you don't even consider maybe doing a quarterback sneak there, and you have Josh Allen in the shotgun running some kind of RPO or whatever it was. He was running an RPO or read option. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think this is as much of a mental it's a mental mind fuck, excuse my language, as much as it is a lack of talent up front when it comes to run. The Bills have a mental hurdle that they just cannot seem to overcome when it comes to short yardage. Not having Morse kills us in the run game, but we still aren't great on short yardage when Morse is in there too. So like, I will say that had a factor. And yeah, they had to go shotgun because under center snaps were bad. That's fine. But like, this has not been a 1-game problem. The Bills have struggled in these short yardage situations, even dating back to last season. How many times we, yell at the TV or yell because like they try to run Zach Moss up the, some play, or Devin Singletary gets tackled in the backfield. It's something the Bills really struggle with. And it, to me, is a combination of all of these factors. I don't think it's like a binary one versus the other. I think the line is not stout in the middle, run blocking. I think there's a mental issue with it as well, knowing the struggles they've had. And I think that, there's also maybe a factor here, at least in this game yesterday, with obviously the injuries and the situations with the snaps being mishandled. So again, another perfect storm, but I think this is something that as the season progresses, the Bills really need to get over this mental hurdle and figure out a way, even with the guys you have, to make some short yardage plays work. And if that's Josh Allen sneaking the ball like we saw Jacoby Brissett do on Thursday night, how many times where he just fell forward for a yard or two? Like, why can't you make that happen with Josh Allen? Now, I know the Browns have a great offensive line.
They were afraid with the snapping.
They were afraid with the snap. But
Eric Wood was on WGR 550 today, and he said that everything that happened at the goal line was probably for fear of a bad snap. And we did have one bad snap at the goal line, right? It was supposed to be a pitch to James Cook, and it was a bad snap at the goal line. So that might have had something to do with it.
Yeah, but what about other games when we tell Mitch Morse? So it's like, it's not just one game. It's a trend now with the Bills in these short yardage situations. It's like, as good as their offense is, it's like that one weakness they really have is these short yardage. And we find ourselves in this situation quite a bit, it seems like. I mean, obviously, because we have the ball a ton, but it makes me nervous every time we're in a 3rd and 1, man. I will tell you.
A couple of people come in and mention Darrell Williams now, and by chance says something's missing about Darrell Williams and Eric Flowers if they're still free agents. Yeah, they're mediocre at best, and they want to be starters, and no one wants them to be a starter. So they're probably sitting at home waiting for a starting opportunity that doesn't exist. I mean, it's that simple. Like, Darrell Williams is not some savior who's going to come in and fix his football team. He had a really good year at right tackle, and then he completely was mediocre as a guard after flaming out at tackle once he got paid. And Eric Flowers has been on a bunch of different teams a bunch of different times for a reason. They're average. They're average football players. They're no better than David Quessenberry, and they think they're starters, and they're waiting for the opportunity that's just not good, that just doesn't exist. By chances, they'll take mediocre right now. Our roster's full of mediocre. Greg Van Roten is mediocre. Greg Manx is mediocre. Ryan Bates, the way he's playing right now, is mediocre. Spencer Brown is mediocre. They're all mediocre. I don't know what you want. At least we have mediocre with upside in Ryan Bates and Spencer Brown, guys who can develop into more. I mean, you can sit here and yell and scream until you're blue in the face. I just don't see very many changes happening to this offensive line until the offseason. But yeah, I mean, it's really tough with this offensive line right now. And I don't want to put too much on the running backs at this point, because I really don't think it's much of the running backs' fault. I mean, I don't see, and again, I don't really, have as much access to the all 22 because of the NFL, whatever. And I haven't gotten a chance to get on the Cover One Huddle too much. I'm not sitting here seeing a lot of holes that guys are missing. I just think it's an issue of the holes not being there, not getting a push in the run game. So I'm not going to sit here and overreact to 3 weeks. I would disagree with that statement right there. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and overreact to 3 weeks. Let's give it to the bye week. Let's see if we can fix some things, and let's see if we can improve this run game before then. But let Aaron Kromer get to work on this offensive line. He's only had training camp. It's still early on in the season. I'm not going to overreact to the offensive line too much yet. I'm not even worried. Like, people have said, I'm worried about the pass block. I'm not worried about the pass blocking at all. Spencer Brown had a couple of bad ones. It looked like the heat was getting to him. And then they yanked him out and he left with heat illness. Josh Allen is the way Josh Allen is. The NFL is the way the NFL is right now. Our pass blocking gives me no pause. It's the run blocking. To me, that is the issue right now. But we've talked about Josh Allen. We've talked about the offensive line. We've talked about the run game. Let's list some positives and some negatives from this football game. Let's be positive, and let's start with the positives. What are some positives that stood out to you in this football game outside of Allen, the running game, and the offensive line?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, and these are not necessarily big things, but nice things that I noticed. One, I think Jamison Crowder has really done an excellent job in sort of solidifying that punt return position. He's had some nice, he's had some nice moves on a couple of these punt returns he's had. He's been very steady fielding the ball. And to be honest, like, he's shown a little bit of burst on some of them. I know he's not like the top end speed guy, and he's not necessarily going to break one to the house. And that's not the expectation, but he's shown a little burst and ability to kind of get upfield a bit. So I've been really happy with what I've seen from Jamison Crowder, fielding punts. And when he's been called upon to catch passes, I know it hasn't been that many. He's done a nice job. So that's number one. Number two, James Cook, I thought did very well yesterday. Only had there you go. James Cook finally getting involved, made some really nice, tough catches over the middle. I thought he showed some toughness as well. There was some, questions about how he was going to acquit himself at the next level as far as being a not the biggest back, but he wasn't afraid to go over the middle, taking some of those catches and making some, extra yards out of those. And they weren't easy catches on a couple of them. I believe he had 3 or 4 catches in the game. I think 4 catches in the game. So I was very, very happy with seeing James Cook getting involved in meaningful snaps, right? Obviously in the Tennessee game last week, they weren't really meaningful snaps in the sense of the game outcome, but perhaps meaningful to him, as you mentioned, in just getting those reps and getting him a little bit more comfortable. And so I think that those reps going back to the Tennessee game really gave him some confidence going into this game, and he showed himself very well. So that's 2 things on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, Greg Rousseau, I mean, he continues to impress, playing opposite of Von Miller. And the linebackers really continue to impress me as well this year between Milano and Edmonds. They've really played well. I know Milano had the drop, but Milano has been aggressive. And
he's been all-pro.
Yes, he has been coming up and making plays in the run game. He's been making plays in the passing game. Obviously, he had the pick 6 against Tennessee. Tremaine Edmonds has been flying all over the field. Milano has been an absolute monster. I agree. So those are the 3 things I would say stand out to me. Crowder, Cook, and then between Groot and the linebackers, I think those are like the 3 things that are wouldn't consider them major things that you might have noticed, but like they are noticeable to me. And I think a lot of people obviously in the comment section have noticed it as well. So some nice takeaways there.
Yeah. Post Mafia comes in and says, I think Hamlin played well. Milano's been a monster. I mean, he's not going to get it. It's just the way the world works. But he's been playing through 3 games like an all pro. Gregory Rousseau had 1.5 sacks. He's developing into a real nice monster there. I mean, the whole scheme was schemed against the Buffalo Bills getting a pass rush, and Rousseau was still able to manage 1.5 sacks. The other half sack went to Damar Hamlin, who I thought looked pretty solid there. Center fielding, there was that 37-yarder to Jalen Waddle. I thought that was more coaching and scheme than it was the players there. And Teron Johnson, absolute monster. Johnson and Milano stepped up in a big way in that game and did what they needed to do. I thought it was a really good defensive performance outside of that, really that one play to Waddle that sort of, won Miami the game there towards the end. And as I mentioned, I feel like the coaches probably drew that one up there wrong on 3rd and 22. I can see why they only rushed 3, but I also question it a little bit, the decision to do that. But Singletary and Cook in the passing game, Singletary 9 for 78 touchdown, got me 25 fantasy points.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. Cook 4 for 37, that design, like slant route to him was pretty sexy.
Yeah. Very
that
nice.
Josh Allen muffed snap on the goal line was supposed to be a pitch to James Cook. So that was interesting that when he's on the field, they're targeting him, which is cool, but also like you're also kind of tipping your hand when he's on the field that the ball might be going to him. So you got to start getting him worked in there more on a regular basis. But Isaiah McKenzie, that's my last shout out here. 7 for 76 and a touchdown. So good with his speed against man coverage when they blitz. I mean, and it was just, he was a real weapon there early on in the football game. Then he started cramping up late as well. There was a video, I think it was Dan Fetz or Thad Brown or one of the beat reporters. They all sort of blend together to me after a game. But one of them posted a video of Isaiah McKenzie doing like a jersey swap with Jalen Waddle. And like, he was like gassed, like he was done, like he was passed out. So just a gutty game from him. And he had a really big first half there, I thought, for the Buffalo Bills. So the negatives, obviously we've already sat here and worked through all of the different errors and mistakes. If you want to revisit some, you can, but maybe other than that, what are some negatives that you saw from this football game?
I thought McDermott maybe should have challenged the Gabe Davis catch in the end zone. I don't think it would have been overturned, but like would have given them, like, if he's going to call a timeout, maybe to give the guys some rest anyway. That was one thing that I thought maybe could have gone either way. I think the fact that they called it
burning some timeouts and not having them late there.
Yeah, I mean, they probably wouldn't have gotten overturned, obviously. I think the botched snaps obviously are killer because it costs you 3 points at the end of the half, potentially costs you a touchdown on that James Cook play you mentioned, and indirectly cause you to change your play calling as well, down on the goal line there where Josh Allen just got absolutely creamed on that one run, lost a yard, and then the rest was kind of history after that. So not great. Tyler Bass missing that field goal, the short field goal, not great. Looked like the hold was pretty good when they showed it on the replay. So not sure what really happened there. And really just not capitalizing on opportunities, right? That was kind of the theme. Like just there was chance after chance for the Bills to kind of separate themselves in the game, and they just didn't do it. Whether it was the Milano drop pick, missed field goals, like we've already covered all this. So I don't know if you want to call it like, just a lack of like, I don't want to call it a lack of composure because that's not what it is, but it was just like an inability to execute it when the times mattered, and the Bills' like propensity to have like the most ill-timed penalties seems to be a trend, and we've overcome it in prior games. But like, it does feel to me like when the Bills have penalties, they're at like the absolute worst times in the games. Like it's like, oh, we get a first down and it's like holding, or it's like a 3rd and long and we get called for like a defensive holding. It's just stuff like that drives me nuts. So while it was only 7 penalties, the the timing of when those penalties happen matters. So we have to kind of think about that as well. So maybe talk about that a little bit as something we hadn't talked about earlier, the penalties. But yeah, I mean, you could go on and on, honestly. And at the end of the day, they still put up 500 yards of offense. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, my list here is pretty short outside of all of those just ridiculous mistakes after ridiculous mistakes. I think someone earlier in the comment section, I think it might have been by chance, said he thought Morris and Gilliam played well. I thought Morris and Gilliam played well as well. They're blending right in, solid contributors to this offense. Dawson Knox felt like he was more involved than 4 for 25, but I guess that was the stat line. That was going to be one of my pauses, and then I looked at the box score stats and I was like, "Oh, it wasn't as good as I thought when the game was
kind of
over."
coming in and out, though, too.
So I mean, I would like to get Dawson Knox more involved, but I felt like he was more involved this game, even though the box score doesn't really show it. But my negatives were I thought the defense played relatively well. I was a little upset with the coaching there on that big play that led to the Miami touchdown late on that Jalen Waddle. The pass rush I thought was a little underwhelming. Wanted Von Miller to take over that game. Now I know the scheme of Miami didn't help, and I know the lack of Jordan Phillips and Ed Oliver didn't help. But I mean, you're Von Miller. I would have. We're used to making excuses for Jerry Hughes, right? Well, the other team got the ball out quick. The other team did this. The other team did that. The Bills are missing this person. That's why Jerry wasn't able to get to the quarterback. You pay Von Miller the way you pay him, his pedigree. He doesn't get those benefits of the doubt. Like he's the guy who's supposed to make the plays regardless of all the adversity facing him. And despite all the odds and the double teams and the chips put against him, he's the one who's still supposed to make those plays. So I would say I was a little disappointed because I thought this was going to be a Von Miller game, and I didn't think about Von Miller once. Now, Leslie Frazier said today he makes everyone else around him better, and I don't disagree. And I'm not going to sit here and bash Von Miller. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just saying I was disappointed, and I expected more from his really quiet day. There are a million reasons why it was a quiet day. I just don't think that we should I don't think that we should use those excuses like we do for Jerry, like you do with a guy like Vaughn. Gabriel Davis had, that drop. He just looked uncomfortable. I think he was supposed to be on a snap count, and then the Jake Kumaro injury threw it all to shit. He looks like he's still coming back from that ankle. He's always been slow historically with those ankle injuries coming back and not looked great coming back. So do what you got to do to get him healthy. He didn't look healthy, and he played 88 snaps in that game. Yep. Which is crazy for a guy who did not look like he was even near 80%. And then my last negative here, I put Ken Dorsey. The run, allowing Miami to pin their ears back inside the 10, force that fumble to give them a free 7 points was bad. The inability to get the running game going and take pressure off of Josh Allen was bad. The lack of options once Miami adjusted their cover zero to account for the Bills dumping the ball down to the running back. Statistically, Josh Allen still had a decent day. We still had 500 yards, but I felt like with as much as Miami was blitzing, we should have been more effective. We should have gotten even more yards, and we sure as hell should have put the ball into the end zone. So execution wasn't great, but I don't think Ken Dorsey had his best day either, and I think he'll tell you that if you asked him, and he probably did. He met the media today. I didn't get a chance to listen to that press conference yet, but I'm sure he took ownership and onus. Definitely was his worst of his 3 games here so far as the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. All right, let's transition now to injuries. Then we'll close out talking about the Baltimore game a little bit. Let's break down the Buffalo Bills injury list here. Micah Hyde, Tommy Doyle, their seasons are over. They are on IR. There is no chance for them to come back. Marcus Stevenson is still on this football team. He's on IR, designated to return. On the PUP list is Trey White and Ike Butker. Boy, could we use both of those guys. Leslie Frazier's feeling pretty optimistic. Trey White could be back relatively soon. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Trey White maybe a little bit before the bye week and then full go after the bye week. Ike Butker, we just don't know. I heard he had a setback. I think Brandon Beane sort of hinted at that when we did the 53-man cut down and they put him on the PUP list. But if he could be available, that would be a big boon to a team that just lost Tommy Doyle for the season. Both of those guys would officially be available to start practicing after this game against the Ravens. Jake Kumaro, high ankle sprain. He's out a couple of weeks. Christian Benford, fractured hand. He's out for a couple of weeks. To me, those guys are both IR with designation to return candidates. sitting them down for 3 weeks might not be the worst thing in the world, then giving them the bye week to come back. And then after the bye week, and then there's a whole bunch of guys with a bunch of sort of fog around whether they'll be available or not. Jordan Phillips with the hamstring, Ed Oliver with the ankle, Dane Jackson with the neck, Jordan Poyer with the foot, Ryan Bates with the concussion, Greg Van Roten with the nobody's given us a solid answer on Greg Van Roten, and Mitch Morse with the elbow. We were having this conversation in the Cover One group chat between things that like Eric is hearing and things that like Banged Up Bills has to say. Probably likely back if we're making any predictions for the Ravens game. Ed Oliver, Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse. Jordan Phillips, he injured his hamstring last year, came back the next week, re-aggravated it, and went on IR. It was a big deal out here in Arizona. I think the Buffalo Bills are going to take their time, probably give him 2, maybe even 3 weeks for Jordan Phillips to heal. Dane Jackson was limited all week. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being full this week and plays, but you just never know with that neck injury. Bates, who knows, with a concussion. But I do think Poyer, Morse, and Oliver are back this week, and that leaves 2 big issues. Number 1, you need some cornerbacks. And number 2, who's going to be starting at right guard if Ryan Bates doesn't come back? Let's start with cornerbacks. What is your take on what's going on at the cornerback position right now? It is Kyer Elam, it is Cam Lewis, it is Teron Johnson, it is Saran Neal, and it is Jamarcus Ingram. That's it.
Well, I think the phones are going to be ringing this week for all those people who wanted to go out and get a Joe Hayden type, right? I'm not saying it has to be Joe Hayden specifically, but there is a list, a long list of veteran corners. They're not great. They're average, maybe even below average, but average corner right now, you're going to take it over Jamarcus Ingram. I mean, I mean, there's no other way to put it. I don't even really know why he was active over Cam Lewis. There's, thoughts around that, but you got to be on the phones right now this week if you're Brandon Beane looking for a veteran corner. I think that's probably, as far as going outside the building, that's probably your number 1 position you're looking at. And then you're hoping that somehow inside the building, I didn't realize he retired. But
He hasn't officially signed that paperwork yet. So he just made that announcement. You could probably coax him back, and then Xavier Rhodes as well coming here with by chance. But my issue here is Trey White's going to be back in the next couple of weeks. Dane Jackson's going to be back in the next couple of weeks. Christian Benford's going to be back in the next couple of weeks. What veteran wants to come here for 2 weeks? That's my problem. That's my issue.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
This is a comment that I hate to make because everyone knows what big of a fan I am of Cam Lewis. But if the Buffalo Bills have no confidence in Cam Lewis as a boundary corner, which was pretty apparent on Sunday when they left him on the bench for Jamarcus freaking Ingram to play boundary corner, then why the heck did you keep him over Nick McLeod? You have Saran Neal as your backup nickel / safety net. Like, I like Cam Lewis. I like Cam Lewis more than Nick McLeod. But if you don't see him as a boundary corner, I don't understand why. I do not understand why they didn't keep Nick McLeod with his safety flex and his boundary corner flex over Cam Lewis and his nickel corner safety flex. That one baffles me a little bit. That one stings.
I mean, it does sting. And I mean, I didn't think it. It's fair to question moves, and we're not sitting here saying like we know better than Brandon Beane or anything like that. So that's where I don't want these words to get twisted. But it's fair to question, like, and try to like talk through it and try to understand it ourselves and try to like maybe, as we talk through it, understand. But I'm having a hard time with this one. There must be something else there that we're not seeing that they know. And like, I will give them the benefit of the doubt in that case, which is fine, but I'm not personally seeing it for this situation. And I agree with you. I would rather have had McLeod. Obviously he's on the Giants now and he's hurt, but still, and RJ comes in and says, I would rather have Saran Neal at CB. At least he's played NFL games at that position before. Yeah, I mean, but if that's what you're deciding between, that's not a good position to be in. So I don't disagree, but it's not a great situation.
And by chance, he took his victory lap on Twitter, and he's taking his victory lap here. And he's like, I've tried to tell you guys, Lewis can't be an outside guy. I disagree with you by chance, but apparently the Buffalo Bills coaching staff agrees with you. So kudos. And he says 5'8" is just not enough for an NFL boundary corner. DJ Reed of the New York Giants has no problem being a boundary corner at 5'8". He doesn't. And even at 5'8", I'll still take Cam Lewis over Jamarcus Ingram, a guy who was historically smoked in the MAC versus MAC wide receivers left and right. I watched every UB game for the past 10 years. Jamarcus Ingram was barely a MAC corner, and he was playing for the Buffalo Bills on Sunday. I'd rather have pint-sized Cam Lewis out there than Jamarcus Ingram. But apparently the Buffalo Bills coaching staff disagrees. Now, we had a conversation on this show in the pregame. Where do the Bills go from here at safety? And we brought up Josh Thomas, and we brought up Marquise Blair and Tony Jefferson and Dean Marlowe. We brought up all these names. I'm at the point now where if the Bills don't have confidence in Cam Lewis at safety, or I'm sorry, at corner, you have to move him to safety. Mm-hmm. You have to move him to safety, make him your number 4 safety. And you have to go find a boundary corner, a body at boundary corner, whether it's a veteran or another guy to come in and compete with Jamarcus Ingram. You got to go out and get another dude, because the depth at cornerback right now is the most concerning thing. It's more concerning than only having 3 finger quote safeties on the roster. We got to figure out this boundary corner situation and just get to the bye week and get Benford and White and Dane Jackson back.
Yep, and that's going to be your easiest path to do it, because if you do move Cam Lewis over to safety, well, one, we don't even know if he can or can't, right? You like to think that he can, but then you only have to go outside the building for one player, right? And it's for a boundary corner, especially given the circumstances. Like, it's clear the Bills aren't comfortable, putting him there, because otherwise they would have activated him before the game as opposed to Jamarcus Ingram. So that seems to be the logical thing to do. It remains to be seen whether or not that shift is possible, because as we've said in the past, we've liked the possibility of guys maybe having some position flex, but we haven't necessarily seen the Bills do that in practice on the field. So until they actually do show that, then you might be looking at a situation where they need to go outside the building for 2 guys, and you'd hate to see that. And so they might be their hand may be forced here, and they may have to actually make a position switch for one of these guys. And I do think that your best chance of going outside the building is to find a boundary corner, because at least there are some bodies out there.
I haven't seen Elijah Griffin sign anywhere, but I mean, if you think Cam Lewis is pint-sized, let me show you an Elijah Griffin. He's a nickel corner. He's not going to be solving our woes at that boundary corner position. Let's transition here now to the offensive line. Mitch Morse. I'm confident Mitch Morse is back. It seemed like I thought he was going to play in this Miami game. He didn't. So that really makes me feel pretty confident. I was shocked when he was inactive, which makes me feel pretty confident that he'll be there for the Ravens game. Bates has a concussion. You never know. Brown was a heat-related illness, so I think he's back. I wouldn't be surprised if they moved Brown to the bench and made Quessenberry the right tackle, just to maybe stabilize and give Brown a little bit more time to come back. But Bates in concussion protocol, Tommy Doyle to IR, Greg Van Roten. We don't know what's going on with Greg Van Roten right now. So the Buffalo Bills depth of offensive line is going to be tested. And on top of that, we don't know who's starting at right guard. Quest tackle. If not, Brown is the swing tackle. Bobby Hart is the only healthy person on the roster. You have Greg Manx on the practice squad. You have Alec Anderson on the practice squad. Where do you think the Buffalo Bills go here to start? Who do you think starting at right guard if Ryan Bates doesn't pass concussion protocol? And where do we go, like, calling guys up to the active roster here?
Man, I mean, I would think, and again, this is kind of dependent on the Greg Van Roten situation, but if Morse is back, I would think it's probably Van Roten starting at right guard if Bates is not, but we don't know the Greg Van Roten situation. So, okay, let's assume maybe both of those guys are out. Then it's either you have to bring up a guy like Anderson, who's really a tackle.
Manx.
I guess Manx. Like if you're talking in-house,
but he's backing up Mitch Morse. You probably don't want him to play, especially with Bates' concussion.
I know. But
and
you just don't have the
Bobby
numbers
Hart.
then.
It's Bobby Hart.
Yep, it's Bobby Hart.
It's Bobby Hart, and probably a call-up for Alec Anderson as your last offensive lineman.
Yep.
It's Bobby Hart and Alec Anderson. So, I mean,
yep.
You better hope Greg Van Roten's injury isn't that serious.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
because if Brown is back, Quessenberry is your swing tackle. And if Brown is back, but you're just not confident in Brown anymore, Quessenberry is your right tackle. Brown is your swing tackle. Do you want to risk their injury by kicking them inside and starting them inside? We had this conversation a million times last year where we disagree with Sean McDermott because he wasn't willing to play Ryan Bates because he was the backup center. Now we're having the same issue here. Would Sean McDermott be willing to play the backup swing tackle, start him at guard?
But this is the thing. Like, I think there's this notion out there that Quessenberry can play guard. Like, he's pretty much played tackle exclusively in his career, and at least for last year, he played tackle exclusively. So while there is this thought out there that
he played it in training camp too,
he did
play it. Yeah,
he did. But I mean, I agree. I would rather have him as the swing tackle in that situation because, like, if Quessenberry gets hurt playing guard, and God forbid Spencer Brown or Deion Dawkins goes down, you are legitimately screwed.
Alec Anderson.
You're screwed.
It's Alec Anderson.
Alec Anderson's coming in.
Bobby Hart
playing meaningful.
Yeah. Bobby Hart could be the swing tackle, I guess. But yeah. I mean, now that I think about it, like I pretty much envisioned Bobby Hart strictly as a guard now. I don't envision him as a tackle because who would? But I guess if you kick Quessenberry inside, Brown or Dawkins gets hurt, then Bobby Hart is your swing tackle. But he had a decent preseason at guard. let's remember that. And Jessica Tennis comes in and says, Judge, I think they'll play the best 5 available. I hope they play the best 5 available. But we saw last year with Ryan Bates that wasn't always the case. We saw last year with Ryan Bates that wasn't always the case. All right, let's transition now to our final topic here. And that is sort of a little bit of a look ahead, our early thoughts of the Baltimore Ravens. Carl Toman comes in here with a super chat. I always appreciate you, Carl. He says Bills lost because the offensive line was crap without Mitch Morse. I can't disagree with you, but I mean, it wasn't just Mitch Morse. They then lost Greg Van Roten, who wasn't playing well, Ryan Bates, and Spencer Brown. They were down to their last 8. And then either on the last play of the game, Tommy Doyle tore his ACL, or Tommy Doyle played the last drive with a torn ACL. They were almost down to putting Quentin Morris out there at guard or something like that. Would have been crazy if that game would have went to overtime or something like that. Because there were no offensive linemen left. So yeah, I agree that a part of it was on the offensive line. I think it was more than just Mitch Morse. It was an abundance of injuries that piled up there. But early thoughts on Baltimore, already prepping, Sean McDermott says, for Hurricane Ian remnants that could have an effect on the game, all the tropical storms and things that travel up the coast after those hurricanes hit. So that should be interesting because, I mean, we're just used to now at this point, the Buffalo Bills playing in crap weather, whether it's too hot or too cold or raining or snowing or wind. We're just used to it at this point. But, adding cornerbacks is vital. But I think maybe you could see, because of the way Baltimore plays, I haven't had a chance to get onto SIS and check out what personnel packages the Baltimore Ravens are using this year. But if they're using a lot of tight ends, maybe this is the Terrell Bernard game, and maybe a guy like Teron Johnson can be used on the outside or at free safety. Like maybe, but again, that's not a possibility. That's just me speculating. And Baltimore is a really physical and aggressive team in these possible poor conditions. So we're looking at the possibility of 2-2 after this week. What are your early thoughts, your early confidence level heading into this Ravens game?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't really intended to be a pun, but it is kind of like a perfect storm for the Ravens here, with the storm coming in, the conditions being bad, the Bills being depleted, not showing really any ability to run the ball with any kind of sustained success, injuries. Lamar Jackson's been on fire the last 2 weeks. That team's really been humming offensively. Lamar obviously doing most of that. Mark Andrews killing it as he always does. And now they've got guys like Duvernay and Bateman kind of contributing as well. So this is a tall order for the Bills coming back to going to Baltimore and having to play in these conditions. With the fact of the matter is like, even if you get some of your guys back, you're still going to be down hard from an injury standpoint. So to me, this comes down to, those 3 key guys you mentioned, Jordan Poyer, Ed Oliver, and Mitch Morse being back is really, really important for the Bills this week. If we can get some positive momentum on the injury front, getting some guys back, I think that can go a long way. Getting Ed back in the middle obviously is going to be important to slowing down that Baltimore run game, which is so good. Jordan Poyer kind of stabilizing that secondary a bit. And then obviously Mitch Morse giving you some hope on that offensive line that you can stabilize some of that from a run game standpoint and protection standpoint against an aggressive Ravens front. They're not great, but they're solid at each level, the Ravens defense. So they have given up plenty of yardage. Obviously Mac Jones and crew put up, plenty of yardage against them. We saw what the Dolphins did. So they can be gotten on defense, but it's still going to be a tough game for the Bills. And this Ravens team to me is a much better team than the Miami Dolphins team we just played. So a tall order for the Bills, going to be tough, but it'll be, we'll see how they respond after this tough Miami game. I think they will respond positively, at least with the guys they have.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just worried. We spoke earlier in the show, whenever the Bills try to overcorrect and get the running game going, I feel like it just makes our whole offensive clunky, and they try to do it in very traditional ways. I'm worried that the Buffalo Bills are going to try to beat the Baltimore Ravens at the Baltimore Ravens game and try to play like the Baltimore Ravens and maybe force the issue in the run game a little too much. That's my biggest concern. I mean, maybe the Buffalo Bills prove me wrong and they go out there and keep doing what they're doing, funneling this offense through the passing game. But I'm worried with the poor conditions that they try to beat the Baltimore Ravens at the Baltimore Ravens game. And I just don't know how much success the Buffalo Bills offense could have trying to do that. Now, we are lucky. I think the Ravens have been struggling in the run this year outside of Lamar Jackson. They were criticized for not being able to get the run game going and milk the clock in that comeback loss to the Miami Dolphins. But, we said adding a cornerback is vital this week. I think this could be the Terrell Bernard game. I think depending on the personnel, if they line up in 11 personnel, it's Teron Johnson. That's just plain and simple. The Bills are not going to put Terrell Bernard in on the slot receiver. It's not something that's going to happen. But I think if they come in some of these like 12 personnel, 13 personnel, they bring the fullback out into the field, I think this could be a game where you see Terrell Bernard get a lot more run. We talked in the preseason about why did the Buffalo Bills draft another weak side linebacker or another Matt Milano type. It's because they maybe want like a little bit of blend of a guy who can drop back, a little bit of a blend of a guy who can blitz, and just a bigger body to help when they're playing some of these teams like the Baltimore Ravens without going away too much from what they do. So to me, you could see some more Terrell Bernard in this game, and that frees up Teron Johnson if Terrell Bernard is in the game. Do you take Teron Johnson off the field? Do you maybe work him in a little bit at boundary corner? Do you maybe work him in a little bit at safety in that free safety spot that's been opened up? I think that there are a lot of different ways in which Teron Johnson could possibly be used if Terrell Bernard finds his way onto the football field. Could none of what I just said happen? Of course, none of what I said could happen. They come out in 11 personnel, 95% of the game. Teron Johnson's playing 95% of the game. But I think that might be, if I had to predict, like, what is an interesting thing? What is something different we could see against the Baltimore Ravens? That would probably be it. And Connor C says putting Bernard as a spy on Jackson would be rough. Honestly, yeah, he's not fast. So keeping up with a guy like Terrell, like Lamar Jackson would be a difficult task for him. So that just about does it for this evening. The Bills locker room, according to some of the things that I read, Allen said that they made mistakes. They can't expect to win that way. I like that response from our quarterback. Von Miller called it good medicine. And the beat reporters kind of generalized the spirit of the locker room as good, proud of the effort, flushing this loss and on to Baltimore. So that is where we will end tonight, unless you have any final thoughts, Dave.
No, we are on to Baltimore officially. Therapy session is out, and I am moving past this game officially.
Yeah. Don't remember, before you turn us off and turn on the 6-6 shootout between the Dallas Cowboys. When will people realize that no one cares about markets? Just put the best football games on. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but before you turn on that 6-6 shootout, make sure, if you haven't already, sign up for that Cover One Pass. T-shirts have already started to get shipped out. People are posting them all over social media. For $57 a year, you can become a One Pass Club Access member here at Cover One. Get yourself a T-shirt, get yourself a decal, and get yourself exclusive member-only content, in-depth analysis, including scheme, play-by-play, and player breakdown, scouting reports, analytics analysis, access on unlimited devices, and access to our Cover One community and contributors over on our private Slack channel. That's always a lot of fun and always some behind the scenes content as well. So if you haven't already, the number one way you can support us is by becoming a One Pass Club Access member. Link is in the bio. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We will be back Sunday before Bills Ravens.
Mhm.
If you missed any part of the show, you're always welcome to rewind, leave a comment section, and we'll get to it over the course of the week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, you guys really do make this show what it is. Heather Smith says, signed up, never got a shirt. F y'all. No, not y'all, just Judge. So appreciate that, Heather. I'm sure your shirt is on the way. I think they just started getting sent out. So if you don't get a shirt, contact the Cover One like Twitter channel or social media, or shoot them a message on here, and we'll get that squared away. So apologies for that, but you should be getting the shirts relatively soon. I see people have been posting them over the past week or so. So I think they have finally started to go out. And if you happen to be listening, you're not a viewer. You're not someone who likes to view things visually because you don't want to look at me or Dave. Most likely me and not Dave. Dave's fun to look at, but you can always listen on demand. Our podcast is always clipped and available to you on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. So you can check us out there, listen to us while you're running on the treadmill, driving to work, etc. Thank you guys so much for your support. And as always, the number one way you can help us out is by simply clicking that share button, copying the link, and sending it to someone you think might enjoy this show. Always trying to grow this thing organically. And thank you guys so much for making this show what it is tonight. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?